My name is Chuma Chino, and I am your family lawyer. I was called to the Nigerian bar in 1988, and I have over 35 years' experience in family law practice. I've helped countless families navigate Nigeria's complex legal terrain, and I am desirous of bringing this knowledge and expertise to you free of any charges. My name is Chuma Chinye, and I am your family lawyer. I remain your friendly guide into family law, and I'm here to help you navigate the tricky waters of family law. We'll be explaining the seemingly foreign concept of prenuptial agreements, sometimes called antenatal agreements, like antenatal, and or premarital agreements. But premarital sometimes connote things we don't like. But fear not, we're going to break down why they are not just for the rich and the famous, and how they can actually save your marriage. So please sit back and let's get started. First things first, though, what is a prenuptial agreement? A prenuptial agreement, as I mentioned to you, also called premarital agreement or antenuptial agreement, is a legally binding contract between two individuals planning to get married. It outlines their rights, responsibilities, and obligations to each other in the event of a divorce, separation, or even death of one of the spouses. It's important to state that this does not mean that they are planning to get divorced or planning to die, but you plan to leave so that if you die, there won't be a problem behind. A typical prenuptial agreement in Nigeria may delineate the property rights of the couple, such as definition of separate and joint property. That is to say, it defines what is mine and what is yours and what is ours, and eliminates the fight regarding this. And this could include real estate, investments, and personal belongings. The demarcation of financial responsibilities by stating the agreement on financial obligations, such as spousal support and expenses by the spouses. In other words, who does what and who brings what to the table. Prenuptial agreements are also used to provide for inheritance, provide for gifts, and other forms of wealth transfer, as well as the terms for divorce and separation, including the division of assets, spousal support in the event of divorce, and child custody, as well as provision for child support and visitation rights if things don't work as planned. Prenuptial agreements may also be used to agree on responsibility for debts and liabilities incurred during the marriage, and make provisions for business interests, including ownership, management, and division of assets, again, if things go south. Next, we'll answer the all-important questions. What are the requirements for a valid prenuptial agreement? To be valid in Nigeria, a prenuptial agreement must, 1, be in writing, 2, be signed by both parties, and 3, be witnessed by at least 2 people. And this is not all. A prenuptial agreement that is valid must be manifestly free from duress, free from coercion or undue influence, and must be made in good faith. That agreement must be reasonable in the eyes of the law and must be fair to both parties. For a valid prenuptial agreement, it must be shown that both parties have the mental capacity to understand what they are entering into. Mental capacity simply means that you have the ability to understand, to read and write, and that you have sound mind. It must be shown that you voluntarily consented to enter into that agreement, so that no one is forced into doing so. And then there must be full disclosure by both parties of their financial standing, of the properties that they own, of their assets and their liabilities. If they owe gbese, you must tell your spouse that I'm owing Mr. B for that ashrebi I bought before we got married. Or if you bought a land and you have not paid, you must disclose it. And the other party must accept that that is the situation. Every prenuptial agreement must not be unconscionable or oppressive to the other party. That is to say, you're a very rich man and you get a young girl to sign some things that she may not ordinarily sign if she wasn't already dependent on you. Now, each party must get independent legal advice to ensure that the agreements are fair and reasonable. The role of a lawyer in this is invaluable and cannot be overstated. Now, you must show also that the agreement is in compliance with Nigerian laws. If you enter into an agreement to kill your mother-in-law, that is not an agreement, and it won't stand before the law. You must also comply with the Matrimonial Causes Act and ensure that everything you do is within what is defined as a marriage. And if your spouse is abroad, your agreement must also comply with international laws and must show that you're not doing child trafficking or anything in that regard. Now, a prenuptial agreement, though legally binding, is not cast in absolute stone. The agreement ought to and should be reviewed and updated regularly to reflect the changes in the status and circumstances of each of the parties. And you must make sure that it's not based on fraud or mistake or misrepresentation. Everything in that agreement must be true to the best of your knowledge and ability. Now, let's talk about why prenuptial agreements are desirable in Nigeria. I know actually what you're thinking. Aren't prenuptials just for the wealthy or the rich? Because of the stuff we read and watch in celebrity magazines and television, where we hear of marital scandals and divorces based on prenuptial agreements. Well, not necessarily true. In Nigeria and elsewhere, prenuptial agreements can be a smart way to protect your assets, especially if you have kids from a previous marriage or a family that's in need of protection. Let me explain. If Mr. Joshua already has a child and is going into a new marriage, it's important that the new wife should be aware that he has a child, and the agreement, prenuptial agreement, should accommodate that and explain how that child will be taken care of. But wait a minute, there's a little more to this. There are some common misconceptions about prenuptial agreements that we need to clear up. And I would like you to think of it as a love letter to your future, ensuring that both parties are on the same page financially, and that those pre-marital gold diggers get only what is fair, whilst latter-day gold miners get only what is reasonable at market rates. Now, let me explain what that means. You are 20 and you find a 75-year-old man and you get married to him. You are looking for his money. It is important that he should protect himself. Or you are a 20-year-old man and you get married to a 55-year-old woman. You are looking for her money. So let us take a look and to see whether prenuptial agreements are recognized and enforceable in Nigeria. And indeed they are, for as long as they are in writing and signed by both parties and witnessed by at least two people. Under Nigerian customary law, and this will surprise you, sometimes prenuptial agreements are made as part of the traditional marriage process. You know, when you go to marry and there are things that are bought and presented as part of the traditional marriage process. And you are told, this is what you should do with our daughter, and these are things you should not do. Those are prenuptial agreements, clearly stating what we expect of you. It's also interesting to know that even Sharia law does not kick against prenuptial agreements. What you know as mahr or sadaq, which outlines the husband's financial obligations to the wife. These are clear prenuptial agreements, saying these are the obligations of the husband to the wife when they get married in futura. That is to say, the agreement is done now, you know your obligations even before you get married. Now, prenuptial agreements define property rights and protect the individuals getting married. It protects your investments and other assets so that getting married does not take away that which you already own before you get married. And quite a number of people worry about this. Prenuptial agreements can also address inheritance rights and ensure that each spouse's wishes are respected. Now, there are some myths surrounding prenuptial agreements. Let's break them. Sometimes we think it's only for the wealthy, but it's not true. Yes, the wealthy can benefit from it, but the poor also can benefit from it. Some people think that a prenuptial agreement is unromantic. It means you're just thinking about the money, but it's not true, because prenuptial agreements can actually strengthen your romance, strengthen your marriage, promote open communication, and remove those nagging doubts and questions about what the intention are of marrying me, of me marrying you. Prenuptial agreements are often considered to be one-sided agreements made between the rich and the poor. But no, two people who are doing equally well are even best suited to enter into prenuptial agreements. So it is clear what each person is bringing to the table or taking from it. And then it used to be that prenuptial agreements under common law were not enforceable. But a lot of court judgments, both in the UK, in the US, and in Nigeria, have changed all of that. It's no longer considered against public policy to enter into prenuptial agreements. And some people think that it's against African culture. But I've just shown you here that some of the things we agree to during customary and even Islamic marriages are prenuptial agreements, if truth be told. It is essential to note that prenuptial agreements should be tailored to each couple's unique circumstances and should be negotiated with the assistance of a qualified lawyer representing each party, not one lawyer representing both parties. This could lead to conflict of interest, and one person who perhaps is paying the lawyer might be able to get an advantage over the other. It is not conflict to you get your lawyer and I get my lawyer, and then we'll come to a table and agree before we do the do. Now let's get real. How do prenuptial agreements help avoid conflicts in divorce? Picture this. You and your partner have a clear, legally binding agreement that outlines who gets what if things do not work. It's like having a roadmap for a messy situation, making the process smoother and less stressful. We can go on and on and on and on. But I think it's important to show you what the law says about prenuptial agreements in Nigeria. We'll go into an interesting tale of love and of legal twists, all centered around the intriguing world of prenuptial agreements. Buckle up, guys, because we're going to explore the case of Oghoyone and versus Oghoyone, a story that brings prenuptial agreements to the forefront of Nigerian law. Our story begins in 1990 when Mr. Oghoyone married Wilhelmina, and I hope I got that right, Wilhelmina Agatha Husodin, a Dutch national. However, while still married to this German lady, Mr. Oghoyone decided to tie the knot again, this time with Patience Oghoyone. On the 9th of April, 1994, at the Lagos City Hall, they got married. Complication, if you ask me. Because being married and getting married again is ordinarily against the law. It's a crime. Before their marriage, Mr. Oghoyone and his second wife, Patience, were partners, not just in love, but in business too. They were both involved in the lucrative trade of importing and selling used cars in Nigeria. But they were good businessmen, man and woman. They decided, before they got married, to protect their interests with a prenuptial agreement, which they labeled a memorandum of understanding. But to all intents and purposes, this was a prenuptial agreement. This document outlined how they would share their joint business interests and properties if things didn't work. Now, fast forward a few years, and the marital bliss had soured. Things had gone bad. Mrs. Patience sought a court declaration from the Ikeja High Court that their marriage was null and void. She suddenly remembered that Mr. Oghoyone had previously married a Dutch lady, and so she wanted their marriage nullified on account of that. She also claimed ownership, either wholly or partially, of two properties belonging ostensibly to the couple. The prenuptial agreement was tendered in court during the proceedings. The court preserved the sanctity of this agreement, and it held that the properties listed in the agreement should be divided as stipulated in the agreement. However, There was one property in contest which was not in that agreement. The learned court, in his wisdom, decided that this property should be given to the wife. The learned trial judge had to decide the fate of this property since the marriage was declared void on account of the previous marriage. In a landmark decision, the court upheld the prenuptial agreement, marking a departure from the common law stance that often considered such agreements against public policy. The court highlighted that when parties put the agreement in writing, no oral evidence can alter or contradict the written terms of that agreement, unless, of course, there was proof or evidence of a mistake, of fraud, of misrepresentation, or coercion, all of which we have talked to you about a little earlier on. But in this case, the agreement stood because the parties entered into the agreement with their eyes wide open. And they knew exactly what they were doing and what they were agreeing upon. In several jurisdictions worldwide, including Nigeria, the law regulating the sharing of marital property upon dissolution of marriage is discretionary. There is no set criteria. The law simply says what is fair and just is what the court should consider. And without this set criteria, decisions can vary widely in the courts, and sometimes leading to claims by parties of gender discrimination, because more of the judges have always been men. Prenuptial agreements, therefore, offer a way, a veritable way to mitigate these uncertainties and ensure fair outcomes for both parties if problems arise in the course of the marriage. So there you have it. A prenuptial agreement can be a powerful tool to secure your wealth before you get married. And it can help you to avoid conflicts, needless conflicts, and ensure a fair division of assets of the marriage. And remember, it's not about planning for failure. It's about planning for peace of mind in the medium term and in the long run. Remember also that prenuptial agreements are generally enforceable in Nigeria, but the courts may review the agreements to ensure that the agreement is fair, that it is reasonable. And if the agreement is deemed unfair or unreasonable, or unjust, or obtained by fraud or misrepresentation, the court may modify or set aside the agreement. Therefore, it's essential to consult with a qualified Nigerian lawyer, preferably a family lawyer, to draft a prenuptial agreement that meets the specific needs of the couple and that complies with Nigerian law. Let me thank you for finding time to join us today on Your Family Lawyer. Until next week, when we bring you a sequel to prenuptial agreements, which is something you probably never heard of, post-nuptial agreements, agreements that you can enter into with your husband or with your wife, even after you've gotten married, as to how you will manage your affairs, how you will manage your assets. That we'll bring to you next Saturday. But until then, please stay informed and be empowered. And like I like to tell you always, please be good to your family. It's important. Be good to your family. My name is Chu Machinye, and I am your family lawyer.